Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, April 19th, 2013. Well, video and photos have been released of people the FBI thinks are responsible for the Boston Marathon bombing. Now, I suspect these suspects are going to be brought to justice. They will not escape justice. There's just too many pictures of these guys. That said, my heart and prayers go out to any family who lost a family member in this explosion, and to all the people who lost limbs. It was like maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen people lost an arm, a leg, or legs. It's horrible. It is gruesome and bloody, and I hope this isn't the new normal. As a side note, I think it's terrible that this is already being politicized by people on the left to demonize, everyone from Republicans to the NRA to even the sequester cuts, blaming these folks and groups for this bombing. That's terrible. And it is atrocious and absurd they're doing this. I also hope that this isn't, yet another way to take away our freedoms here in America. That said, North Korea, once again, is threatening to start a war without notice, to start an attack without notice. And I think they've put the world on notice in the last several weeks, in the last few months, saying that they would bomb the U.S. mainland, use nuclear weapons, fire weapons into Japan, South Korea, attack South Korea. I think it's the rhetoric is over the top, and I hope the bombings in Boston and also the fertilizer plant explosion in Texas, I don't think it's terrorism. I'm not talking much about it, but I hope this doesn't distract our military leaders and our political leaders and let them take the eye off the ball. We have some severe, some touchy areas around the globe where war could start in a moment, and one of those places is Syria. Now, the British and the French are claiming that there is credible evidence that Bashar Assad's regime has used chemical weapons on more than one occasion. Remember what President Obama has said about the use of chemical weapons in Syria? Now, Syria has this ongoing more than 2-year civil war. 70,000 people have died in this conflict, the civil war. And Obama said that, well, listen, if there's chemical weapons used, that would be a, quote, game changer, and it would be a, quote, red line. And what he was implying was, action, military action in that part of the world. In another story, just south of the Syrian border in Jordan, we are sending more troops. Now, it's not a lot. It's only a couple of hundred, but they hail from Fort Bliss, Texas, home of the 1st Armored Division. They bring with them significant firepower in the form of tanks and other weaponry. Now, this adds to the U.S. military forces already in Jordan. And this is another hotspot. Why they're doing this? They want to contain, the civil war in Syria. It's already spilled into Lebanon. It's spilled into Turkey. They've been firing into, Israel, and they don't want this to go into Jordan. The Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, says, yes, we're sending the troop, and yes, military action is an option, but it is an option of last resort. Might I remind everyone, the Valley of Armageddon is in that area of the Middle East. Gold had its worst drop in 30 years, and I'll tell you, when you were watching this week, the financial news commentators all across the spectrum, particularly CNBC, also Fox Business, they were giddy about gold being crushed. I mean, this is a worst drop in 30 years. Dennis Gartman of the Gartman Letter, not really a gold bull. Sometimes he is, sometimes he's not. But basically, he published something on his Gartman Letter that said, this happening, this kind of a deviation is what they call it, a standard deviation. It's almost 5. But in layman's terms, it's something that only happens about once every, nearly 5,000 years. This kind of the amount of the drop, the speed of the drop, this kind of thing only happens once about every 5,000 years. Even in the newspaper at USA Today, they brought up the fact that 53,000 100-ounce contracts were dumped onto the market. And the analysts would say, why would you do that? You're selling a commodity. You want to get the most for it. You try to usually, if you want to sell that much, you vent it into the market slowly so you don't crush the price. all the sources, many multiple sources, from Gartman to Jim Sinclair to you name it, many people say this was a contrived event, and the evidence is all there. It even showed up in the USA Today. It was a contrived event, and this is backfiring. Stories are coming out around the globe that people are swarming gold stores and gold outlets and silver outlets to buy physical metal. There are stories coming from Asia, from India, here in the United States. The U.S. Mint this past week sold a record 63,000 ounces of gold in one day. 63,000 ounces of gold, more than actually, a little bit more, in one day. That's a record. And then there are reports coming from big dealers that demand is extreme, that some people have already sold out of silver or are in the process of selling silver, or some of these big places have already sold 50% of their silver, and demand for silver and gold is extreme because people want gold and silver in hand. Even John Williams at shadowstats.com says, hey, this is not speculation. This is real demand. And take a look at the physical picture. People are buying because they are fearful. I don't think they're greedy. I think they're fearful with all of the, Cyprus bank accounts and talk of confiscating bank deposits, and they seized the Cypriot gold. I think people are basically reacting the way they should. Nothing's fixed in the economic world. They can't even prosecute people because they're fearful that the system is so fragile. This is what Eric Holder says, that they can't prosecute these big bankers. They can't prosecute them because they're afraid they'll crash the system. I think this is absolutely outrageous. And instead of the president taking a look at this, enormous budgetary problem, or these wars around the globe that could get started off, what is he going after? Gun control. And this past week, boom, it failed in the U.S. Senate. Why did it fail? Well, a lot of senators are worried about, the Second Amendment and how it says shall not infringe, and that some of these senators are saying that, that we really need to talk about mental health and also these mood-altering drugs, these antidepressants. There's some different ones of them. But what's happened in all these, the Colorado shootings and the shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, these were crazy people. And in most of the cases, if not all, they were taking antidepressants, which the medical community has said that they were never really intended for long-term use, that they need to work on that. But instead of the president working on that, they're trying to confiscate guns, they're trying to confiscate assault weapons, lower the amount of bullets in a clip. And I'm sorry that those people, that there are people who have lost their lives, but this is not, these are not sane people deciding to do something crazy or getting mad. These are not law-abiding citizens. These are people who are absolutely insane. Absolutely, positively insane. And I got to tell you that these bankers that Eric Holder just last month said he couldn't prosecute them, right? True. He couldn't prosecute them because he could collapse the global financial system. Well, William Black, who I had on this week, I asked him about this whole, thing where they can't prosecute these bankers. At first, the president said that, they did the least ethical things. Now the evidence is so overwhelming, they don't have any credibility if they don't say, they did commit crimes, but now, we can't prosecute. He says that's ludicrous. That'll crash the system? That's ludicrous. And William Black, you should watch the interview. He said that, we basically have felons running our biggest financial institutions. And these big bankers have blood on their hands. People are killing themselves because they've been foreclosed on. Google foreclosure fraud. People who lose their houses, some of the biggest places where they're committing suicide are Nevada, like the number one place for foreclosures, Arizona, number two. I think number four is California. These are the biggest places for suicide. How many people have killed themselves because they lost their house? I don't know, but that's a fact. They have. They lost their house, they lost their jobs, they feel hopeless, and they're killing themselves. So maybe the bankers shouldn't be prosecuted for murder, but they should certainly be prosecuted for enormous, ongoing financial crimes. I want to thank everybody for your support. I think we have the smartest people on the web. I've said that many times, but I do. I think we have some of the smartest commenters on the web. Thank you for your comments. That helps support the site. Thank you for using the donation button. That helps support the site. I really appreciate you coming here. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend.